It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. My brother's wedding had been a long-awaited event, a grand affair that took months of planning. Every detail was carefully executed, from the grand venue to the smallest decorative flower arrangements. My family was thrilled, and so was I. I'd spent weeks helping my brother organize everything, from coordinating with the caterers to making sure all his friends and family were in attendance. Little did I know, the happiest day would soon turn into the most disturbing. The day after the wedding, as I was cleaning up the aftermath of the celebrations, I decided to check my bank account. I do this every now and then, just to stay on top of my finances. I had been saving up for a new car, and I was sure that my savings were secure. As I opened my banking app, my stomach dropped. I stared at the screen in disbelief. $8,400 was missing from my account. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe the bank had made an error. But as I checked the transaction history, I saw that it had been transferred to an unfamiliar account. Panic slowly started to creep in. My mind raced. I had no idea who could have done this. I immediately called the bank, but they couldn't help much at that moment. The money had already been moved to an account outside of their jurisdiction, and the transaction was marked as completed. I felt a knot form in my stomach as I sat in the quiet of my room. The wedding had been such a whirlwind of joy and excitement that I had barely had a moment to relax. How could this happen so soon after the celebration? The next few hours felt like an eternity as I scoured through every detail of the day, trying to figure out what had happened. I kept asking myself the same question: who would do something like this? My first thought was to blame the wedding guests. There had been so many people around, some I didn't know well. It could have been anyone from the distant relatives to the new friends my brother had made through his wife. But then again, why would anyone go to such lengths to steal from me, someone they barely knew? As the days went by, I started to notice strange things. Little discrepancies in the behavior of my family members, especially my brother. He seemed overly distracted, avoiding eye contact when I asked him about the missing money. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the more I thought about it, the more suspicious things seemed. The missing money was only the tip of the iceberg. My sense of unease grew with each passing day, and it became clear to me that someone close to me was involved. But who? The answer seemed so elusive, almost like a shadow that danced around the edges of my thoughts. As I reflected on the wedding, I began to realize that there were certain moments that didn't sit right with me. Small details, inconsequential at first, now started to stand out like flashing neon signs. The day after the wedding, my brother had been strangely distant. He'd barely spoken to me, his usual warm and jovial demeanor replaced by an air of distraction. I tried to brush it off, thinking he was just caught up in the post-wedding chaos. But the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. His wife, too, had been acting differently. She had been cordial enough during the wedding, but afterward, she seemed to be avoiding me. One evening, as I sat alone in the living room, a thought hit me. Could my brother have taken the money? It seemed impossible, but the more I thought about it, the more plausible it became. He had access to my personal information, and during the wedding planning, he had made several trips to my house, often asking about my financial situation. It wasn't much of a stretch to think that, in the midst of all the wedding festivities, he might have taken advantage of my trust. The idea felt like a punch to the gut. I loved my brother. We had always been close, but now I felt betrayed, violated in a way that words couldn't describe. My suspicion grew when I realized that he had been acting strangely ever since the wedding. He had even taken a few unexplained trips in the days following the ceremony, always with vague excuses. As I continued to search for answers, I came across a strange detail. One of the guests had mentioned seeing my brother near my room the night before the wedding. It wasn't unusual for him to be around, but something about the way the guest said it made my heart race. The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture they created was one I wasn't ready to see. I began to feel the weight of the situation bearing down on me. The money was gone, but the trust one had in my own family was slipping away. My mind raced, trying to connect the dots, but it felt like I was chasing a shadow. I needed answers, and I was determined to get them. No matter how twisted the truth might be, the tension in the air was palpable. Days turned into weeks, but the unsettling feeling of betrayal never left me. I was no closer to finding the culprit who had stolen the $8,400 from my account, and the growing suspicion that it might have been my brother gnawed at me like a relentless hunger. Every time I looked at him, the doubt intensified, but I couldn't bring myself to confront him directly. How could I accuse him without proof? How could I shatter our bond on mere suspicion? The thought was unbearable. The quiet unease at home was growing more intense by the day. It wasn't just the missing money anymore, it was everything that had happened since the wedding. The behavior of my family had become increasingly strange. My brother, once warm and caring, had become distant and guarded. He would dodge my questions, avoid eye contact, and act like he was busy whenever I tried to talk to him. His wife, too, had become more aloof, but I couldn't quite put my finger on why. It wasn't like either of them to behave this way. They had always been open, loving, and supportive, at least, that's how I had always perceived them. One night, after my brother had left for another one of his business meetings that he refused to explain, I found myself unable to sleep. I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts racing, the same questions spinning around in my head. The silence in the house felt suffocating, and in that moment, something inside me snapped. I had to get answers. If I didn't act now, I feared that the truth would slip away forever. I decided to confront him. But before doing that, I needed evidence. My bank statements alone weren't enough, they only showed the transaction. There was no way to trace the money beyond the point it left my account. I had to dig deeper, find the link, the chain that would connect the dots and give me something concrete. My brother had always been secretive about his tech skills, often boasting about his ability to hack and manipulate data. He wasn't exactly a stranger to the world of digital transactions, and I realized that he might have had a hand in this. Somehow, I spent the next few days tracking down every detail I could. I analyzed my phone's usage, cross-referenced my bank account history with the timestamps of when I had made transactions, and tried to trace the IP addresses of where my banking app had been accessed. The results were inconclusive, but one thing stood out, a subtle detail that I hadn't noticed before. A particular IP address, one that I didn't recognize, had logged into my account late the night before my brother's wedding. The timing seemed too suspicious to be a coincidence. But I couldn't confirm who it was without more information. The next step was confronting my brother, but I knew it wouldn't be easy. The tension between us had been building for weeks, and I feared that accusing him without solid proof would tear our relationship apart forever. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I had no other choice. I had to confront him directly. That evening, when my brother returned from one of his mysterious meetings, I asked him to sit down with me. I could feel the weight of the conversation pressing on my chest, but I knew I had to do it. I tried to keep my voice steady as I told him everything, the missing money, my suspicions, the strange behavior, and the trail of clues that seemed to point to him. At first, he was silent. He didn't look surprised or defensive, instead, he seemed almost relieved. His eyes shifted uneasily, and I could tell that he was trying to come up with a response, but the words never came. It was as if he was struggling to hide something deep inside, something he couldn't admit. The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. Finally, he spoke, but not in the way I had expected. "You've been looking into me, haven't you?" His voice was quiet, almost apologetic, but there was a coldness to it that sent a chill down my spine. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. "I had to. The money is gone, and I have no idea where it went. I thought you could help me understand what happened." He took a deep breath, his gaze avoiding mine. "You really want to know?" He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I didn't take the money. But I know who did." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt dizzy, as if the floor beneath me had suddenly disappeared. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My brother looked at me for the first time, his expression unreadable. "You're not going to like this, but the truth is, I wasn't the only one who had access to your account." You know who else was there that night? I shook my head, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Who? He looked away again, his face pale. It was her. My wife. She's been planning this for months. The words felt like a slap to my face. My heart raced, and I felt my world come crashing down around me. My brother's wife, someone I had considered a sister, had stolen from me? The betrayal was unfathomable. How could she? How could someone I trusted do something so vile? But my brother wasn't finished. I didn't know at first, but I saw things I shouldn't have. She's been running up debts behind my back, and when she found out about your savings, she saw an opportunity. He paused, his eyes flickering with guilt. I didn't want to believe it, but I had to face the truth. She's been using me, using you, and I was too blind to see it. It took a moment for the weight of his confession to sink in. The truth was even darker than I had imagined. My brother wasn't the mastermind behind the theft, he had been just as much a victim as I had. But that didn't make the betrayal any easier to bear. The woman I had welcomed into our family, the one I had trusted as my own, had stolen from me in the most calculated and cruel way possible. My brother's eyes filled with tears, and he reached out to me. I'm sorry. I never wanted this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to respond. The pain was overwhelming. How do you reconcile with someone who has betrayed you, someone who has broken the bond of family and trust? I wanted to scream, to lash out, but I was too exhausted. All I could do was sit there, numb, as the weight of his words settled into my heart.